When I worked at the hospital, I used to hear a lot of stories from fellow co-workers and staff, some family members, of a certain waiting room just off to the side of the operating rooms. Family would wait there to receive news from their loved ones, to get updates. It wasn't your typical waiting room with, just regular chairs and whatnot. This was more, it looked like a grand sitting room. Now, this hospital is over 130 years old. The walls had some old paintings, large paintings. Some of the paintings were, 6 feet wide by 7 feet high, some of them. There were huge paintings on these walls. It was a very tall room, very high. Wallpapered, wall sconces around, dark drapes. The furniture looked dated. If you walked into the room, it would feel like you were in the 1890s, let's say. Very old. Some of the furniture was updated, but not too much. So one night, I remember a coworker telling me that she had gone on her break, and when she got out of the elevator, there was a lady standing off to the side, and she was a bit startled, and asked her where she could get something to eat. So my friend said to her, well, there's nothing really open right now, but she goes, if you give me a minute, I can take you downstairs and I'll walk you through the emergency department, and I can show you there's a couple of late night restaurants that are open just around the corner. So my friend went, came back, lady was standing there near the elevator, so they both went down. She took her outside, showed her where to go, and she left. On the way back, the lady brought some food back and asked for the nurse that had helped her out. So they couldn't quite figure out who she wanted, so she described her. And the nurse went in and got my friend. She came out, she says, hey, you're back? I see you got something to eat. She says, yeah. She goes, I just need some help getting back upstairs. Just wait for him to come back. He said, you know what, I'll take you up, not a problem. So they walked towards the elevator. As they're waiting for the elevator to come down, she says to my friend, she goes, I have something I want to tell you. She goes, it's going to sound very odd and strange, but I'm sure you've heard of a lot of strange things in an old hospital like this. So my colleague said, yeah, go ahead. Nothing surprises me anymore. So the elevator doors opened. She got in with the lady. They went up to the 5th floor. And as they're in the elevator, she says to my friend, she goes, I'm the only person in that room. She goes, but there's someone else in there. So my friend froze right away and said, uh-huh. So at that moment, the doors opened and the lady stepped out. But my colleague stepped out with her and said, I'd like to hear a little more. So as they're walking towards this waiting room, it's off to the side. She's telling her that, she goes, I try to get a nap in there, but I couldn't sleep. She goes, there's someone walking around inside the room. She goes, I figured maybe it could be some of the cleaning staff, or it could be someone else that has just, come down here to perhaps, just sit down and just, have a rest. She goes, what's odd though is everything's dark in here except for a couple of wall lights that are on, some sconces that are on. And she goes, they keep walking back and forth, and at one point she goes, I got up, walked over, turned the light on, and there was nobody there. So my friend said, just so you're aware, and I don't want to spook you or anything, but it is an old hospital, and people have said they have heard and seen strange things in here. So as they're talking about this, the lights start flickering in the room. And then the lights went back to normal. So they continued the story, but the lady said, it's weird because she said, I hear like someone talking and pacing back and forth. She says, but I can't see anybody. Usually you can make somewhat of an outline in the dark, right? She goes, I can't see anybody, but I can hear somebody. So my friend just said, you know what, if you're not comfortable here, we could maybe take you to another area. She goes, well, not really. I want to stay here. My husband should be out shortly, and I want to be here for when he comes out. So my friend let her be, went back to work. After the shift was finished, this is about 7:30 in the morning, my colleague went upstairs to the waiting room, and there was nobody in there. So she walked over to the nursing station there at the desk and asked about the lady that had spent the night there. And they said, yeah, well, her husband came out of surgery. They're up on the 16th floor now. So, yeah, everything's fine. And so my friend decided to go up and just say hello. So she went up to the 16th floor, found which room she was in, went over. There she was happy. Her husband was fine. Everything was good. Everyone's happy. And she said, I got to tell you something. So she came over and she said, right after you left, she said, I went to sit down. The lights were dimmed. I started reading a book. She goes, and suddenly in the corner of the room, I noticed one of the paintings there. It looked like it was looking at me. Now, I mean, it's normal with some paintings, the way the eyes are drawn, that they look like they follow you around as you're looking at them. She goes, that I understand. But she said, I actually was looking at the painting, and the guy in the painting, she goes, I could have swore his eyes moved. So my friend said, wow, that's the first one. That I've never heard. She said, yeah. She goes, I saw the eyes move. So my colleague stayed for another couple of minutes and said, good luck with everything. And, if you need anything, we're here. So she left and she came down and she had told me about this a few days later. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, well, next time we're on shift together, let's the two of us go up there at night on lunch break and let's just sit there and see what happens. So one day it happened that we were both on the same shift. So when our lunch break came, about 2 in the morning, we both went up to the 5th floor waiting room. There was no one there. So we had the lights dimmed, we were sitting down, we were just quietly chatting. And all of a sudden, I see from over her shoulder a shadow move off to the side. And I said to her, don't move. She goes, oh my God, what did you see? I said, don't move. I said, a shadow just came up from behind the chair you're sitting on, and it's moved off to the left. So she got up. We both walked towards the area where we thought this thing might be. And we're literally 5-6 feet away from this painting, and we're looking at it. And all of a sudden, the eyes looked like they slightly moved on it. We both freaked out and took a few steps back and went, oh my God, did you see that? And she's like, yes, I did. Went over, flipped on the lights, and looked around. There was nobody there. Walked over to the desk, which was a little further down the hall. We asked the clerk there if anyone else had come by there, and she said, no, you're the only 2 people. No one else has come in there tonight. So we go back into the room, and I said, that's just crazy. So we sat down, we're just, talking very quietly. So we decide to get up and start walking around the room very slowly. Now, it's a pretty big room, actually. You're looking probably about maybe 70, 80 feet long, and maybe another 100 feet wide. It's a very, very big room. A lot of couches, a lot of sitting chairs, some coffee tables, a big fireplace, which of course is not working, but it's just there for decoration, I guess, now. And a lot of old paintings. So we're walking around, and all of a sudden we both feel like someone just walked behind us and lightly just touched the back of our necks. We look around, there's nobody there, but suddenly we look off to the side, and there's 2 shadows standing near the painting. So we're both looking at this going, oh my God, grab your phone, let's get a picture of this. So she pulls her phone out, snaps a picture. We look at the phone, there's the picture, and there's the painting on the wall, but we don't see any shadows there. We saw them with our own eyes, but there's nothing there. So we're like, oh my God, that's really creepy. So we both get out of the room, we figure, let's go have our lunch, we'll go back to work. A couple of years later, I ended up having to go in for surgery. So a couple of friends had decided to stay in the waiting room there. A few other friends and some family members had gone off to get something to eat. So a couple of my friends who stayed behind had dimmed the lights a little bit. It was a very big room, and at that time, with all the lights on, it was very bright. So they dimmed the lights down. There's dimmer switches all over the room there. So they dimmed the lights down. They're sitting there chatting. And all of a sudden, one of the paintings on the wall literally falls off to one side and hits the ground. They both jumped out, freaking out. They ran out of the room. They called the clerk down at the desk. She came over. Went, oh my God. So the painting was still hanging from the top left-hand corner, but the bottom right-hand corner had fallen down and, hit the ground, but it was still up against the wall. She said that painting's been there for over 100 years. That's never happened before. So they're both freaking out. So they called a couple of the maintenance guys to come over. They came over a little while later, and they were picking the painting up. As they're picking the painting up and maneuvering it around, it's very heavy, they noticed that the painting, for some reason, started going from like it was a heavy painting, but it started getting heavier all of a sudden. It's like, well, that's odd. So a couple more guys came over, helped lift it up. I think actually a couple of the security guards too came. So they lifted the painting up, they put it back on the clip that was on the wall, and it was fine. And that was so weird. So they left. So my friends were like, should we stay here or should we, go somewhere else? They stayed in the room for another hour and a bit. So during that little hour and a bit they were in there, they both started getting kind of a queasy feeling. They said the air got kind of heavy there all of a sudden. They felt like there was like pressure. And so they got up to walk out of the room, and all of a sudden it was like as if they were being pulled by a magnet. This is how they described it. And they couldn't walk out of the room. They were just standing there trying to go forward, and they couldn't. But they felt this feeling around them that like they were being held back. So they both turn around, and there against the wall near the painting that had fallen, they see dozens and dozens of shadows all over the wall. One of my friends actually fainted. She passed out. The other guy was there to help her out and started yelling for help. My friend thinks that painting might have been an attachment or a magnet to a lot of entities over the years. So they brought her down to the emerge, had her checked out. She was there for a couple of hours. She was fine. I came out of surgery, everything was fine. They told me the story a couple of days later, and I'm like, oh, I should have told you guys. There's a lot of creepy things that happened in that waiting room. But theirs was the creepiest. So once I recovered and came back to work, I told everyone at work about it, and they're like, oh my God. Yeah, we've heard stories, we've heard, different apparitions and different things, but this one takes the cake. That whole side of the wall where the paintings were, where that one painting had fallen, was covered with shadows, and they were walking back and forth, very uneasy, very confused, very scared. I hope you've enjoyed the story of the waiting room.